Welcome to the 12-Step Recovery Evolution podcast. Visit recoveryevolution.co.uk for more episodes, helpful resources and links to our social media. Also visit the site for information on how you can attend a future Zoom session or workshop live. Thank you.
Morning everyone, thanks for your kind words and happy birthdays. Going to get straight into the book this morning. So over the last little while we looked at the On Awakenings and we sort of broke down some of what the wording is and what we think is applying to, and we talked about what we can do in the morning and what we can do as we go through the day on pages 86 and 87, and it's pretty much the same thing keep reoccurring. So that's something to pay attention to, that it's always asking us to do the same things. It's very simple. So if you wasn't here yesterday, you can listen to the podcast. I think we've got 13 of them now. You can catch up, and you'll probably notice even if you have been listening to this, it's good to go and listen to the podcast, because you'll probably see the theme emerging as it's going through. And again, I think that's kind of what I've learned through the passage of time, that there is a bit of a theme to this, and it is quite simple, but it just takes a long time to get to understand it, I think, and that's kind of the nature of it. So hopefully we can now, so we've talked about what to do in the morning, we've talked about what to do during the day, and now we're going to have a look at what to do at night. Now, again, this is step 11. There is 10 steps before this one. We've looked at some of them, but this isn't a way of short-circuiting the steps. Tomorrow, I think we're going to do a bit of a talk on step 12, and so this is around step 11, but again, it's kind of like, this is very much the same theme that runs all the way through. I know it's step 11, but it's really a whole program's designed to sort of bring us to a certain way of being. So I'm going to start reading at the bottom of page 85, and it says, much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration and direction from him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. So again, you kind of don't want to keep banging on at people, but you do realise that even what the reason that we're doing this, the reason I'm doing this, is to try and help you guys actually practice this program, and so you can have this experience for yourself. So the whole book in lots of ways is not just telling you what to do, it's actually also trying to get you to do it, and so you can have the experience for yourself, because the solution to this is inside you, and that's kind of where we want to direct you, and but it's not just inside you any old how. There's a certain way to get yourself in a position to receive this. So it's following these directions. So to some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. So again, it's like, it's this development. We're developing this extra sense that's in us. It's always been in us. It's in everybody. And the fact that, I guess you can come to the conclusion that the reason that we're doing what we're doing is because we're not connected to this sixth sense. Because once we are, our lives begin to change radically and in a more favourable way. That's what most of us have discovered, that have tried to follow this path and opened up these new avenues of reality that we were talking about yesterday to ourselves, that they're infinitely more preferable way of being than what we had before we did this. And that kind of just saying that reminds me of when I think Eliza read it about Bill's spiritual awakening when in the beginning, but I think one of the doctors went up to him and he kind of asked the doctor, do you think I'm crazy? because he had one of this profound change in consciousness. But the doctor said to him, he said, look, it's better than what you got, so hang on to it. But of course, he learned to develop it. And again, that film Bill Wilson's story, it's going to be one of the first things I think we're going to do when we get our centre open. Is I think we're going to have a film night, and we're all going to watch a film, and I think that's going to be one of the films that we're going to watch. So it says step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are constantly using it. That's not true anymore. But the thing is that this is also back in 1937. So, of course, meditation in the last few years has become a lot more popular. But again, I've always loved meditation. I still enjoy meditation, and I've done lots of different forms of it. And, there's benefits in most of them, but I've not found a simpler meditation than in this book to address the problems that people with addiction have. So again, I think when they jump over this and go to something that sounds better or is more ancient, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you're probably not going to hit on what's written in this book, which I think is very important. So it works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. And then it goes into what we sort of term as the nighttime infantry. Now, I think the trouble with this sort of thing is we sort of developed this idea of 10-10-10 some years ago. And the reason that we did it is we started these groups and we thought about what's the minimal kind of amount of practice that we could ask people to do over a 12-week period. And so we thought 10 minutes of reading spiritual literature, 10 minutes of meditation, and then 10 minutes of prayer or setting good intention for the day, which obviously works out about half an hour. So we thought that was kind of like the minimal discipline. So we started to get people doing that. It seemed to have a great effect. The people that did do it for 2 weeks really noticed a change in their way of being, in their life, in their consciousness. They noticed their life improve, their emotional state improve. And as we're doing that course, then we'd kind of like stop sort of pushing them to do it. And most people, they kind of drop off and they stop doing it, but they notice this, and that was kind of an intentional thing. But then you'd notice that if you didn't mention it for a couple of weeks, pretty much everybody kind of like stopped doing it. But they noticed their life changing again and a decline in their life again. And then so you'd let that go on for a couple of weeks, and after a couple of weeks, you say, who hasn't been doing their daily 10-10-10? And a lot of the group would say, oh, I haven't. And then say, well, how do you feel? And they notice a change. They notice, you're trying to make the connection. You're just trying to make this connection that this works if you work it. This doesn't work if you don't work it. That the result's nil unless you work it. So then you'd say, well, now I'll start doing it again. And then everybody would start doing it again. And then pretty much everybody would report that their mood, their energy, their life, their emotional state improved. And hopefully that made the connection that if you do this, your energy goes up. You start getting the higher power. And again, it's pretty much sort of universal when you're actually working with people. They call you up and they've got, you can tell when you just got life problems, and then you can sort of tell when they've got not doing the program problems. And, when they actually start doing the program, when people call you up, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow about sponsorship and, what we should be probably saying to people. But, we often just say, look, man, you've been working your program. And and it's not like, have you not been going to meetings, but have you not been working your program? And mostly they say no. So you start working their program again. And again, all I can report is everything starts to change. And so, powerless is the problem, and power is going to be the solution. And this is how we get the power. And how we get powerless is we stop doing this. And it can be difficult to make that connection of exactly what is going on, but you kind of want people to have that experience that they can realise that when I'm doing this, I do all right. When I'm not doing it, I kind of don't do all right. And that can go on for years for a lot of people. I work with people that over a lot of years, they sort of do the program, they start doing all right, and for whatever reason, they're doing all right, and then they stop doing the program. And then they start sinking back again, and then they phone you maybe some years later, and they're like, man, I don't know why I keep doing that. And again, I've got people that, probably over 10 years that they're doing that. They call you, they start doing all right, and then stop doing whatever it is, pull away from you, and then they slide back again. And then some years later, they call you back, and they're like, man, I don't even know. I keep doing it. I'm not going to do it this time. But they do for whatever reason. That's another story. So he's saying at night time, he said when we retire at night, so at the end of the day, we constructively review our day. Now, I think the word constructively is quite important here. Because I think sometimes when people are doing infantry, they can kind of just focus on all the negatives, and it's all right to focus on just negatives as long as you're not doing it in a negative way. As long as you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're not, just keep looking at your negatives and thinking, oh, I'm a piece of shit, and just keep bringing all that. This ain't about keeping negatives in your mind all the time. It's about trying to get rid of them. So, again, as we go through, it's just highlighting that, look, it's okay to learn from your past, which is what we should be doing, but we shouldn't be living in it. And so there's a very different way of, you can do this in sort of at least two ways. You can do it in a way of, I'm just positively looking at my day to do a review, or you can do it in a very negative way, and you're just going to make yourself sick and unhappy and probably have sleepless nights and get resentful. And, it's not about being focusing on your negatives all the time. It's just a case of looking out for them. So it says, so we review our day. Now, again, this is kind of like this, as it's saying in the morning, where we're starting to do visualizations, but we're looking forward. Now, I think this is a very similar thing, but it's asking us to now look back. Now, the fact that we write it all down on sheets of paper and, we do it in that way, that's just a way of trying to help you start to develop the consciousness of this. So it's not necessarily about filling out the sheets. And, if I fill out my resentful sheet or I write it down every night, I don't think it says here anywhere that we write it down. It's just a way of realizing at the beginning, getting the new people to start to realize that this is a practice, and it's a good practice to do at the end of your day. But the point of it is to be able to look back through your day and, to do that visualization, to see where you was resentful, to see if you were selfish, dishonest, or afraid. Do you owe an apology? Have you kept something to yourself that you could have discussed? It's even that is like, for me, my sponsor used to say, look, if you've got a resentment for more than 15 minutes, or any real heavy emotion for more than 15 minutes, then you should probably call someone. Because if I can, when I call somebody, it goes very quickly. There's certain things I know about myself that kind of can be a little bit difficult for me to resolve myself. Now, 99.9% of the things in life that I've come across, all bother me at different kind of stages, but there's a certain small portion of things in this world that really sideswipe me. And when I get there, when they get inside me, You know, some things can really get inside me quite deeply, probably because it's already in there. And when that stuff happens, it's a lot quicker process for me to actually phone somebody up and talk to them to try and deal with it myself. Now, notice there is things I'm pretty sure that absolutely everything now that could possibly happen to me, I probably could work through it myself. But the thing is, it may take me 4 or 8 hours to do that. But if I phone somebody, I can do it in a 15-minute, or in an extreme case, maybe an hour phone call, where I can actually get it out of me. So it's not just in there gurgling up loads of emotion and making me feel stressed, making me feel unhappy, making me feel uneasy. And so when it says discuss with another person, I tend to think it's more about that for me than it is. Again, look, I'm only telling you what my point of view is of this, and look, we could go a lot deeper than I'm going to go in this. I'm just trying to stay on the surface at the moment and make it simple. But you know, there could be, you know, I might need to speak to somebody. Like resentments. I think most of my resentments come from this, which I never knew until some years into recovery, because I'm a very resentful person and it's easy for me to pick up resentments. But what I've realised was that I could feel very resentful over things that people done that weren't really that bad. I mean, you know, the emotional disturbance that I would get for what they'd actually done was incredibly out of proportion. And I started to notice on further investigation and deeper inventory that what really was happening to me was that somebody would do something, but really what I should have done in that moment was talk to them. But I felt I come from a dysfunctional family. So when you point out somebody else's potential defect or something they done wrong, you were going to end up in confrontation and they were probably going to turn it around on you. And so to actually communicate how I felt to somebody, especially in things that were a little bit difficult, was almost impossible for me to do. So somebody would do something to upset me and I'd get really angry. Now anger is like a sort of a secondary emotion. It kind of covers up what's underneath, and we can probably go into that a little bit more if we get time. But so as I kind of learned to get underneath the anger, what I really discovered about a lot of these resentments that I was getting was that I was actually afraid to go and speak to the person and say to them, sorry, did I understand what you said there? Did you kind of just want to hurt me? Did you want to, did you mean did I get that right, what you just said? You know, I found that kind of hurtful what you said, or I found that a bit, you know, down-putting, what I felt like you were trying to put me down, or, you know, whatever it is that I was actually feeling, that then I couldn't tell the people. So they created a situation which meant I would have to go and talk to them. And I felt more resentful to them about that. I felt more resentful to them that they created a situation that as an adult and as a spiritual person that I need to go and tell them the truth. But I couldn't do that. And so I'd get so angry inside myself and I would project it onto them for what they did. And then I would go and tell people what they did and try and make myself feel better by getting people to agree with me. But see, underneath all of that, what I discovered is that I was afraid of confrontation. Now, a lot of people that knew me in the old days, and maybe now, I go, there's no chance. But it come out wrong. It'd come out, then I'd come out aggressive, and I'd come out angry, but I'd realised that I was actually angry at myself. I was actually angry at my inability to tell the other people how I felt, or even ask them questions. Did you mean that, what you said to me? Or, I'm not happy with you stealing my money off me. Or, I'm not happy with you talking to me in that way. See, and I think one of the greatest freedoms that I discovered in step 9 was the ability to be able to go and say to people, have you got a minute? And then tell them how I feel, or tell them what I think, and let them reply. And so if I feel resentful at somebody, then I generally need to go and, speak to them. I mean, I usually speak to people before I speak to them, especially if I was feeling all this, angry emotion to them. I tend to like to calm that down, but usually it's myself that I'm angry at, with my inability to express myself. Because some situations in life demand that I express myself if I want a good, healthy conclusion. And I think that you find that as you go through the steps, that's what most of this is about. That most of what I read here, and most of what we've been talking about, is to try and get me to increase my ability to hear and to speak, to meditate, to pray. See, because he's saying that my problem is this separation, which is a relationship, isn't it? So if you look at the problems in your life, you look at what you're resentful about, what you're fearful about, it's pretty much all going to come down to feeling separate. Even when I'm angry at somebody, say Fox does something to bother me, and then I go and talk to Sonia and I slag Fox off, it makes me and Sonia feel a little bit more closer together by going against the other person. So generally, when you're actually angry at somebody and you're telling somebody else how angry at them, you're trying to actually start to feel close to something or somebody again. And so this whole process is saying, look, it's this separation is my problem. And I've got to deal with this relationship problem. Because again, I can't find any other solution to what this is saying. I can't find any other goal. What this is saying is that I'm out of relationship. I'm out of relationship with God, with myself, and with other people. But then it puts me in that position. It's like, but I'm not good at relationship. I don't know how to be able to communicate. I don't know how to listen. And so that's something that through doing this program, I've had to learn to develop over the years, because we all know that good relationships are based on good communication. And we do a group on a Tuesday night that we've been doing for a while, more around dysfunction for dysfunctional people. And, the answers that we come to is always, I think, is we need to improve the quality of our communication. And communication is learning how to listen to the other person to the point that I can understand them, and to be able to communicate, to speak to the point that they can understand me. And then if you've got two people willing to do that, it can be quite difficult to begin with, but you usually actually find places where we can agree, and that feeling of separation starts to leave, and the feeling of well-being starts to replace it. So that's kind of what this is saying to us. It's not just some practice. It's a case of saying, look, all through the day, you've been having relationships with your children, with yourself, with work, with strangers, with the bloke at work, with the next door neighbour. And it's saying, just now stop, reflect back, to look back and see Were you resentful today? And if so, don't beat yourself up, but capture that and have a look why. Because it says that, were we kind and loving towards all? Because remember, we're trying to get these principles in our life. We're trying to practice these principles. It says, what could we have done better? I mean, these are all good questions and probably deserve an answer, but I don't know if if you find a problem, these are answers that you should be looking for. What could I have done better? And if you don't know yourself, because I didn't always know what to do in these situations, because I've not had that many functional relationships in my life, and I had to phone other people and ask them sometimes, what could I do then? What am I supposed to do? And they'd be like, go and talk to them. And man, the amount of fear that would bring up in me, that I'd have to go and make myself vulnerable and tell them that I've got a problem, or I need some help, or I feel lonely, or I feel less than when you talk to me that way. I mean, that wasn't an easy task, and don't get me wrong, it can fill you with dread when someone says, you need to go and tell them how you feel. You've got to go and be honest. And it was quite unbearable, and it's something again that still needs to be practiced. But I realised that if I didn't make them changes, I was going to stay in the same relationships, and I didn't want that in my life. I wanted to. I realised that I want better relationships with myself, with God, and with other human beings. But don't get me wrong. Look, not everybody likes me, and I don't get on with everybody else, but at least I'm kind of fine with that. I don't have to hate them, and don't even have to be overly angry at them. But the relationships that I'm more focused on in my life, there's things I have to do in them. There's things I have to, they don't just sort of grow themselves. Relationships, they demand sort of me to do certain things. I can't go being resentful and selfish and dishonest and expect to have good relationships with someone. I can't be sneaking around behind people's backs and stealing off of them, and expect that they still love me. They're not my parents. And so there's things that I had to do, and I found actually emotionally there's things I had to say that were like, man, some of this stuff when you actually have to go and say it, you feel like you're going to pass out. You start sweating. You can feel that anxiety coming up, the fear coming up. And, man, some of it took a lot of courage to go and say the simplest things to people. And so it said, or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. So it's actually just making a review of our day. We're just reviewing our day. We do the paperwork. It's kind of good, but it's not really the purpose of it. The purpose of it is just to be able to look back, look in our relationships, look where they were a little bit stressed, try and capture that information because we want to improve it. We want to figure out what we could do to improve it. And again, so that's kind of like a meditation itself. And then it goes into a prayer. It says, after making our review, again, we ask God for forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. Now, again, in the years that I've been doing this and the amount of people that I've talked to over the years, even them hardcore infantry takers, that they seem to take infantry every night, but it can become a little bit mechanical. It can become a little bit clockwork. And they keep coming up with the same stuff day in, day out. When they do their review, they do it like a tick box exercise, which is not the point. The point is to get your mind to be able to notice it. The point is to become conscious of it for the order of removing the wrong motives, to increase the higher plane thought life, to help us to become more conscious of this higher power. And so we make that prayer. And then again, the corrective. So they don't seem to make a lot of corrective measures. So you get people that say a lot of infantry, they might phone up and they're saying, man, I've been doing it for years and it's just getting boring. I just keep coming up with the same stuff all the time. And I've got this example that always sticks in my head when I get to this point. It's about this. Somebody phoned up and they said, you know, I don't know what I've got this problem with my wife that every time I come home late and she's made dinner and she gets angry at me and it does my head in because, you know, I've been working and she made dinner for 5 and I come in at 7 and she says I should call, but I'm working and it's gone on for years. And I said, mate, do you do your infantry? And they're like, yeah. And I say, well, what's the corrective measure? And they're like, oh, I know, I should be more humble. And I'm like, that ain't the corrective measure. Telling somebody you need to be humble. I said, the corrective measure is phone your wife up and tell her you ain't going to be home for dinner. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Doesn't it? But honestly, if you can easily get caught in that, because a lot of people do get caught in that. So we got this whole group about from infantry to amends, because the amendment, the change, the making a different choice, creating a different avenue of reality. And I mean, that sounds stupid, but you watch it in your life with a lot of your problems. Honestly, they're just as dumb as that, a lot of them. But you're not seeing it. It's almost like there's a block. And so once you start actually being able to remove these blocks, you start noticing your life changing. And then I tell you, one of the things I like to say, you know when you've understood this because it's freaking embarrassing. It's almost embarrassing that somebody had to tell you. But it's a mental problem. It's just that our head keeps reacting all the time. We just keep reacting and we've stopped thinking. And so we just keep going down the same pathway all the time. Instead of actually stopping for a moment. We want to go, but we stop. We relax. We take it easy. And then we say, God, what should I do? And he says, phone your wife. And you phone your wife, and she's like, thank you. And I got a little bit of dessert for you tonight. It's wonderful. So this is kind of what this is about. It's not just an academic exercise. It's changing, getting you to change your mind, to identify where your mind needs to change. Now, I've got a few more minutes and I'm going to give you a little bit more time to feedback today. So I just want to go back to, where is it? Into Action, chapter, oh no, actual fact, is it chapter 5 or 6 or chapter 6, Into Action on page 72. So I just want to have a quick little look back there, because again, I just want to demonstrate that, you know, when you get to step 11, it's just a tighter version of step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's all just trying to get you into the same place. It really comes down to these two things. It's just this communication. It's just learning to listen, to become more conscious, to listen, and to communicate, and to speak in prayer better. So chapter 672 says, having made a person infantry, what should we do about it? Now it says we're trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator. So it's saying quite clearly there the purpose and the reason for this. And it's saying to discover the obstacles in our path, in the pathways, what's blocking us off. It says we have omitted certain defects We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed, it will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our defects. And again, that word, the exact nature, you can go quite deep with it. But again, it's not just about looking at the anger. It's just saying I'm angry, because again, I could have just said I'm angry, I'm resentful. But when I actually started to look a little bit deeper at the reason for them resentments, and then that fear of confrontation was closer to the exact nature. And again, we can even go a little bit deeper into that, the reasons of the fear of confrontation, you know, the not feeling good enough, but also just the plain truth that I'd never been taught that way. I'd just not been around people that spoke that way. I come from a dysfunctional background. The communication was usually a lot of arguing, shouting, screaming, being aggressive. It wasn't just clear. I wasn't taught that way, which left me feeling quite vulnerable and exposed and feeling stupid. And you know, it kind of bit into then to the childhood of not feeling loved and the neglect. And you know, so you know, when somebody stood on my toe, that was all of that was coming at them, not just the fact they stood on my toe. It was vastly out of proportion. So the exact nature can, you know, it can keep going a bit deeper and a bit deeper and into this self. It's not just about the surface stuff, because if you're just looking at the surface stuff, you're just going to keep sticking a plaster on it, and it's going to keep reoccurring and reoccurring, and you're just going to keep saying sorry, and they're going to get bored with you saying sorry, and you're going to get bored with you saying sorry, because it's you know, I don't want to keep saying sorry. I don't like saying sorry, so I don't want to keep saying it, and I want to change my behaviours. I don't want it to keep happening. And again, none of us are perfect, but don't give myself permission to go and abuse people anymore. So this brings us to the fifth step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. And again, that's kind of presuming that you even know what they are, or you've got the language to be able to understand. Now, this is where good sponsorship comes in, because they can help you make the connections. So if people don't understand this language, or they don't understand the 2 points of where you're coming from and where you want to go to, you've got the blind leading the blind. And you're just going to go around in a lot of circles until you both end up in a ditch. So make sure that the people that are sponsoring you have got a bit of an understanding of what the purpose of this is. Because, you know, one of the big issues throughout the fellowship, I believe, is that there's not enough good sponsorship. That, you know, there's good people helping people and supporting people, and we can talk about that a little bit more tomorrow when we talk about the step 12. But they're not necessarily helping people understand the program. And when they're doing these, you know, if you don't recover from this stuff yourself, it's very hard to help someone else recover, because it is quite difficult stuff, some of it. You know, I think there's people that have just got the addiction problem, but then there's people with the dysfunction problem. Now, I don't think they're the same problem, but they get very integrated. And you know, you have to deal with the addiction problem before you can deal with the dysfunction problem. But the dysfunction problem can really hinder the addiction problem if it's not dealt with. So you can get in a bit of a catch-22 with it. And so, you know, as the director of a treatment centre, I realise a lot of what we're actually dealing with people is really nothing to do with addiction. It's dysfunction. And so we have a lot of different treatments, some to deal with the addiction and some to deal with the dysfunction, some to deal with the underdevelopment. A lot of people, the problem is they're just underdeveloped. You know, telling them to go and get a job is really not going to help them if they're not capable of doing a job, because they've never developed the capacity to be able to do that. So the goal is to identify that and then help them develop the capacity until they can get a job. And so, problems aren't all the same. He says this is perhaps a difficulty, especially discussing ourselves with another person. We think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is no doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. And again, a lot for them reasons that I told you, it is kind of a humbling experience, but I found it very difficult to tell people how I felt. And probably my recovery began when I actually was honest with somebody about how I felt. And that's a process that I'm still mastering as I get older in my life, being able to tell you how I feel without abusing you, even if you've upset me or hurt me, that I can still tell you how I feel without abusing you. Not always easy, but I'm still practicing. He said, in actual practice, we usually find solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought that it was necessary to go much further. We will be reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we can see good reason why we should do this. The best reason first. So again, I tell you, the best reason for doing this is the best reason for doing this. There's lots of other reasons, but this is the best reason first. If we've skipped this vital step, we may not overcome our drinking. So that's a pretty good reason. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep something to themselves, certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they've turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wonder why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. So again, like I've said a few times, that when people have been around recovery for a while and they've relapsed and they phone you up and say, look, can you help me? And I know the reason why they fell. Because again, it's never any different. And I say, are you going to tell me the things that you held back on your fifth step? And then you start revealing things to them that they never really knew, because again, they were blocked off. One, always say, you still resent your parents. You're still angry at your mum. You're still angry at your dad. Who you resent for that? What did you do you're trying to hide? What are you harbouring that's blocking you off? Because you've got to get it out. No matter how bad it is, if we don't get it out, it's going to block you. And you can't afford to be blocked. So if you've got anything that you're harbouring or hiding, I'd highly recommend that you try and speak to somebody about it. Not just anybody, but try and find the right person that can, like it says, that can help you deal with it. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took infantry all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. I mean, sometimes you could pretty much say to people, I mean, I don't recommend this, but you could. You'd say, that infantry that you're just about to read on your step 5, throw that away and tell me the things that you're holding back. Because if you're going to read all of that infantry to me, or that step 4 to me, but you're holding anything back, reading that to me is not going to keep you sober. It's certainly not going to get you peace of mind or serenity. And you're just going to, if you do manage to not drink and take drugs, you're going to live in a tortured emotional existence for the next how many years you're alive until you get rid of it. He said they took infantry all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egotism and fear. They only thought that they humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. So that's the beginning of that journey of looking into self, getting this connection sorted out, learning how to become conscious of this power greater than yourself. And the sign of that is you'll notice your relationships should be getting a bit more comfortable. Not always the Waltons, but You're not, even if you're in difficult relationships, you're not going so completely crazy about it. You're just working through it, and that's the difficulty. So I'm going to leave it there.